And speaking of massive dumps, let's learn about another massive dump.
Young Americans, and we talk about the true causes of our civilizational malaise. I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show.
Splitbringer, do it.
The Ben Shapiro Show is sponsored by ExpressVPN. Protect your online privacy. Joe Biden was named by 22% of those asked. 12% said Vice President Kamala Harris. None of the rest of the Democrats rose above single digits. The much-beloved Pete Buttigieg garnered 4%. AOC, Elizabeth Warren, Massachusetts Representative Joe Kennedy, for some reason, and Stacey Abrams each attracted 3% support.
Indy Windy.
Meanwhile, 6% of all those who answered preferred someone other than those on the list. 31% said they were unsure. And the numbers suck. Only 37% of Democrats say they are enthused about Joe Biden holding the top spot, and only 16% say they want Kamala Harris, and no one even gets more than low single-digit support after that. The numbers for Joe Biden continue to decline. There's another poll out today, and it shows voters pessimistic about the economy, Biden's leadership. This is according to a new Wall Street Journal poll. The survey, according to the Wall Street Journal, reveals a set of danger signs for the Democratic Party as it prepares to defend narrow majorities in the House and Senate. Voters by a large margin see economic and fiscal issues, including inflation, as top priorities for Washington, and they view the GOP as better able to handle them. Joe Biden's overall approval rating right now is at 41%. His disapproval is at 57%. What's much worse for Joe Biden, the strongly approve of Joe Biden number is 19%. The strongly disapprove of Joe Biden number is 46%. Woo! So you got 22% of the American public saying they somewhat approve of Joe Biden and 10% saying they somewhat disapprove. But people hate him much more than they love him, for sure.
True. Fuck Joe Biden. I don't like Joe Biden.
Sure. More voters apparently say they would back a Republican than a Democrat for Congress, 44% to 41% if the election were held today. That is within the poll's margin of error. But again, most of these polls tend to underestimate Republican support and Republican turnout. So these numbers are really, really bad for the Democrats right now. And as far as whether the country is on the right track or on the wrong track, according to that Wall Street Journal poll, 63% of Americans say the country is on the wrong track. Only 27% say the country is on the right track. Some 61% of Americans say the economy is headed in the wrong direction. Some 46% of Americans expect the economy to get worse next year, compared with 30% who expect it to get better. 29% margin in favor of the proposition that inflation is going to get worse rather than better. People have really bad expectations with regard to crime. By a 33-point margin, people think the crime is going to get worse, not better. 26% more Americans think that the border is going to get worse, not better. The nation's political divide, 50-point margin between people who say it's going to get worse and people who say it's going to get better. On the issues, the GOP has an advantage. On the economy, inflation and...
Yeah, Audi stick, I would guess that because of the massive outpouring of vitriol that I've been subjected to, mods are a bit on edge, and they probably interpreted your username as a dig at trans people. That's what I would hazard a guess. That's okay. Not your fault.
The border. Democrats have an advantage on getting the pandemic under control, but again, those numbers are not particularly stellar. On improving education, it's fairly evenly split. On making healthcare affordable, Democrats have an advantage, but the issues Americans care most about, rebuilding the economy and getting inflation under control, Republicans have massive advantages. So Democrats have a real problem on their hands. But the bigger issue here is that Americans just seem consumed with the idea that the future is going to suck. And I think one of the reasons that they feel consumed with the idea the future is going to suck is because we as a country seem to have lost purpose. The Surgeon General of the United States came out yesterday, and he announced that we have a mental health crisis among young Americans, which...
True, we do. You know what a good solution to that would be? Some kind of, I don't know, like Medicare for all type situation, so everyone who needs mental health care help can get it. I wanted to let you know regarding the free education. Where I'm from, the education for local citizens is free from middle school to university. Has a huge impact on our society, one of them being encouraging people to study. Also, love your hair. Thank you, Addy Stick. Yeah, no, like, there's really no excuse to gatekeep higher education behind a paywall, except to make people money. It has massive benefits to make it free.
If you watch TikTok for any length of time at all, you know is true. You can view my review videos over at YouTube, where I go through some of what goes on TikTok, and it is basically just a mental asylum in full public view for the walls. There's a bunch of people who are signifying their real mental disorders and doing so for people to cheer them. The Surgeon General had to put out this 53-page report today.
Well, wait, Ben Shapiro, do you want people to be able to talk about their mental health or not? Like, would it not be good for people to say, hey, my name is Mark and I have ADHD. My name is Sharon and I have BPD. You know, like, I feel like that kind of world would be better, where, like, we have a better understanding of mental health and we have the ability to, like, respect other people and aren't, like, belittling others on the basis of, like, their mental health conditions. And it seems like that would be a healthier society than just being like, oh, you need to go to the mental asylum, you absolute fucking insane weirdo. Like, nah, that's not as good. That's not as good.
Talking about how children are in real trouble. According to the Surgeon General, he says recent national surveys of young people have shown alarming increases in the prevalence of certain mental health challenges. In 2019, 1 in 3 high school students and half of all female students reported persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness, an overall increase of 40% from 2009. Since 2009, okay, we're not talking from 30 years ago. We're talking about just over the course of the last 12 years, an increase of 40%. According to the government, of course, this is shaped by social media. It is shaped by drug use. It's shaped by, but that doesn't go to any of the real underlying issues that are enervating the society. According to the government, quote, we know that mental health is shaped by many factors, from our genes and brain chemistry to our relationships with family and friends, neighborhood conditions, and larger social forces and policies. We also know that too often, young people are bombarded with messages through the media and popular culture that erodes their sense of self-worth, telling them they are not good-looking enough, popular enough, smart enough, or rich enough. That comes as progress on legitimate and distressing issues like climate change, income inequality, racial injustice, the opioid epidemic, and gun violence feels too slow. Of course, the U.S. Surgeon General is saying the reason that kids are now suicidal is because we haven't done enough on climate change or income inequality or racial justice.
Yeah, but Ben, do you know what happens when you don't do enough on it, like when it comes to income inequality? It means people at the bottom don't have much economic mobility, right? We know this. There are studies that have looked at income mobility in countries all across the world. The United States scores as one of the lowest in the developed world, meaning that if you are born into a poor family in the United States, you are far, far, far more likely to remain poor. And we know if you're born into a rich family, you're far, far, far more likely to remain rich. And if there is a racialized component of that, that means that our country continues to be segregated along racial lines. It's just that the segregation is less in the actual, like, wording of bills and more along economic lines. So, yeah, these things contribute negatively, and these things do have effects on mental health. If you are, let me tell you guys, if you are in a rich family where your family has the means to get you to, like, a psychologist, has the means to get you the health care you need, has the means to keep you fed and clothed and going to school consistently, you're gonna turn out to have a little bit better mental health. You're gonna turn out to have better mental health than somebody who doesn't have those things. It turns out your material conditions have a large bearing on your mental health. And as far as, like, social media messaging goes, what are the underlying reasons for our current beauty standards? What are the underlying reasons for our beauty standards? In the Middle Ages, for example, in medieval times, people across Europe viewed corpulence as like a sign of wealth. If you were overweight, it was a sign of how wealthy you were, and thus like being overweight turned into like a beauty standard of the time. Well, now if you're in a poor situation, you have to be hustling, you have to be working all the time. And it turns out that leaves you less time to work out, to be fit. And because of the way the way food is produced in the United States, it tends to be grossly unhealthy for you. And so people in the lower class are often eating food that is much less healthy than people in the upper class, which means our beauty standard has changed over time to unrealistic levels of fitness that are unreachable for anyone who doesn't have a lot of excess income. Right? So there are a lot of reasons for this, but it's often along economic lines, aka material lines. And the reason those beauty standards are then perpetuated is because the beauty standards are a reflection of, wealth, but also they become marketing tools to sell other products. It's literally just capitalism at work, crushing people and people's self-perceptions.
Or alternatively, there's a giant gaping hole in the soul of America's young people, and in some of its older people, that is not going to be filled by your bullcrap excuses for motivation on a daily basis. The government is also blaming technology platforms. They say when not deployed responsibly and safely, these tools can pit us against each other, reinforce negative behaviors like bullying and exclusion, and undermine the safe and supportive environments young people need and deserve. All of that was true before COVID-19 dramatically altered young people's experiences at home, at school, and in the community. The pandemic era's unfathomable number of deaths, pervasive sense of fear, economic instability, and forced physical distancing from loved ones, friends, and communities have exacerbated the unprecedented stresses young people already face. Our obligation to act is not just medical, it's moral, says Vivek Murthy, the Surgeon General of the United States. We're going to go through more of this advisory from the Surgeon General on the mental health of young people, because I think it goes to a far deeper cultural and civilizational malaise that is now set in and really is cancerous. We're going to get to that in just 1 second.
Yeah, but Ben Shapiro is really I guess when Ben Shapiro reads that document, he's like, no, actually, the gay kids do need to be bullied. Like that, when Ben Shapiro reads this and hears about bullying is on the rise because of social media, Ben Shapiro is just like, well, you know what? Those kids should be bullied. I watched 5 TikToks on YouTube one time, and those kids should be bullied because that'd be good.
First, let's say that you and your friend, you have a bad marriage and it ends badly with you and your friend killing the guy, and you go on the run, and eventually the police catch up with you, and you have a choice. You can either be arrested and you can face trial and face down your sins, or you can drive off a cliff with your friend. Well, as you are freeze framed above the Grand Canyon in the air before your car plummets to the end of its parabolic arc, well, as you're sitting there next to Gina Davis, you think to yourself, man, probably should have bought life insurance via Policy Genius first.
I was wondering where that was going.
Nah. In order to assume that it's due to biological factors, you would have to assume that over the last 12 years, there has been a major change in the biology of human minds, which not a lot of evidence to suggest that. Environmental factors, yes. According to Vivek Murthy, some mental health disorders seem to cluster in families. They're often shaped by multiple genes, whether an individual has mental health condition via the reference quote, see how much you could say mental health crisis is because we're not doing all the things that the left wants you to do via the government. And that, of course, is really silly. So first they try to claim that mental health conditions that have gotten much more grave among America's young people, that is due to biological factors. Nah. In order to assume that it's due to biological factors, you would have to assume that over the last 12 years, there has been a major change in the biology of human minds.
Hey, Ben, there has been a change of biological factors, right? Specifically in how we view different aspects of human biology. We have access to new medical technology that we didn't over a decade ago. We have new access and more knowledge when it comes to mental health than we did a decade ago. We have more access to a lot of different diagnosis and medical tools to evaluate things than we did a decade ago, right? That's not a controversial statement. That's just how technology works. This is just us improving upon systems that previously existed. That is the whole march of human scientific progress. Ben, like 400 years ago, people thought like children were determined by like frogs on your belly, like a tiny gnome delivered a baby to your uterus. Like, people thought crazy things about biology. And over the course of, modern medicine, like progressing, we learned about different factors that can influence biology. We learned, for example, just yesterday, Ben, about how the human Y chromosome that is present in every male is likely doomed in the long term, Ben Shapiro. Turns out human biology does in fact change. No biological organism is predisposed to staying the same. That's not how biological life works. I'm here for my daily suffering. Oh. I'm going to go to the bathroom, and I'm going to be mean, and I'm going to let the video play.
Which, not a lot of evidence to suggest that. Environmental factors, yes. According to Vivek Murthy, some mental health disorders seem to cluster in families. They are often shaped by multiple genes. Whether an individual develops symptoms can be further modified by experiences and surrounding environment. Environmental factors can range from exposure to alcohol or drugs during pregnancy to birth complications to discrimination and racism, to adverse childhood experiences such as abuse, neglect, exposure to community violence, and living in under-resourced or racially segregated neighborhoods. Okay, some of these are well substantiated. The notion that if you suffer from discrimination, that this leads to massive mental health crises, the suicidal ideation stats don't really back that up. In fact, it tends to be middle upper class white people who have higher levels of suicidal ideation than, for example, impoverished black people. So if it's really about class issues, then or race issues, that really doesn't explain it. They say that adverse childhood experiences can undermine a child's sense of safety, stability, bonding, and well-being. Moreover, ACEs, again, those are adverse childhood experiences, may lead to the development of toxic stress, which can cause long-lasting change. And of course, the answer to all of this is the government getting involved in everything. So they put together a graphic adopted from the WHO, talking about factors that can shape the mental health of young people. And here is what your government says. Social and economic inequalities, discrimination, racism, migration, media and technology, popular culture, and government policies all can exacerbate mental health problems. Neighborhood safety, access to green spaces like parks, healthy food, housing, healthcare, pollution, natural disasters, and climate change. This is going to affect your mental health. Climate change is going to affect your mental health. Relationship with peers, teachers, and mentors. Faith community, school climate, academic pressure, community support. Relationship with parents. Basically, everything in life can affect your mental health. But what has changed, right? This is the big question. What has changed since 2009 to 2019? According to the Surgeon General report, from 2009 to 2019, the proportion of high school students reporting persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness increased by 40%. The share seriously considering attempting suicide increased by 36%. That's a huge number. The share creating a suicide plan increased by 44% between 2015 and 2011 and 2015. Youth psychiatric visits to emergency departments for depression, anxiety, and behavioral challenges increased by 28%. Between 2007 and 2018, suicide rates among youth aged 10 to 24 in the United States increased by 57%. Early estimates from the National Center for Health Statistics suggest there were more than 6,600 deaths by suicide among the 10 to 24 age group in 2020 alone. Scientists propose various hypotheses to explain all of this. They say that it might be more people discussing mental health concerns, but they also are blaming digital media, increasing academic pressure. I'm going to have to hear why increasing academic pressure is causing this, considering that our schools are underperforming and there's less academic pressure to perform in modern America than at any time in recent American history. They talk about income inequality exacerbating this sort of stuff, which is weird because we didn't have this sort of spiking depression and suicide rate during the, Great Depression. They talk about racism, gun violence, and climate change as factors. Again, it all comes back to there's a problem in society, and it must be our favored solutions that are the actual solutions. Now, if you are going to examine what is wrong with the youths? What exactly is happening with the youth? You would have to go a little bit deeper than this. Right, so they talk about some of the things that have been exacerbated during the pandemic. They say that if you've lived in an urban area or an area with more severe COVID-19 outbreaks, this has exacerbated mental health problems. If you are worried about COVID-19, if you experience disruptions in routine, which, by the way, would suggest that the lockdowns did much more damage to kids than actual COVID-19, because the number, again, of people under the age of 18 in the United States who are healthy, who've died of COVID-19 across the entirety of the pandemic is somewhere between 10 and 20, according to Marty McCary of Johns Hopkins University. So when you're talking about why young people are depressed because of COVID, it isn't because they're scared of COVID. Or if they are scared of COVID, it's because the adults are idiots. And the reason is because they've been locked in their homes and told that they cannot see other human beings. Okay, but the bigger problem here is that, again, the government's suggestions as to why we are seeing mental health problems across young people in the United States are always geared toward what can the government do to fix it. And the problem is that this is not predominantly a governmental issue. This is predominantly a philosophical issue that has now boiled down to how we raise our children, or if we even have children at all. Some of the most durable statistics in mental well-being show that, for example, religious people tend to be less suicidal. They tend to have less suicidal ideation than people who are less religious. There's good evidence to suggest.
Wait, did he say something really stupid about the Great Depression? Did he say something real stupid? Did I miss it? Did I need to back it up?
And that class has very little to do with it. There's good evidence to suggest that race has very little to do with it. And certainly climate change has very little to do with it. So in a second, I want to get to why I think that young people are more depressed, more suicidal, what our culture has taught.
Yeah, why should young people be depressed that their cities are going to be underwater in like 50 years? Why should you be depressed about that? I don't know. True.
People. Why we have prepared them for...
Wait, he said that people weren't killing themselves during the Great Depression? Oh, they absolutely were. People literally jumped out of buildings. What is he talking about?
A life of misery. Why we have set up expectations that simply cannot be fulfilled. And yes, that are exacerbated by the culture that surrounds them from social media.
Or, Ben, do you think maybe that it is harder to fulfill expectations of a certain standard of living in a society run by capitalists? Do you think maybe that most people who grew up thinking that their lives were going to be better than their parents, turns out that under capitalism, that is just kind of like a non-starter? I don't know. Who knows?
But why they are not robust enough to withstand that? I mean, you have to remember that young people, their grandparents, when they were 18, they were jumping off boats at Normandy, headed into the face of certain death. And today, young people are suicidal because of Instagram. So we're going to have...
Hey, Ben, not all 18-year-olds were in World War II. I don't know if you need to know this. Not all 18-year-olds were in World War II. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that if my grandfather was still alive today and I asked him, "Hey, Granddad, do you want people to be going through World fucking War II again?" He'd probably say, "No, that was an awful experience. A lot of my fellow veterans killed themselves." I think that probably there was some kind of residual mental effects of going through World War II. And you can tell that by looking at the interviews with these people who cry at like just remembering and recounting like one or two experiences they had during the war. They like old men who are like 90 years old just start weeping openly. And you know what? That's because it was an extremely bad experience, and a lot of people died both during and after World War II as a result of it.
We have to decide why we think that is happening to this extent. First, let's talk about the clothing you wear. So the modern workplace is rapidly changing. So is...
Hey, Wazir D, I'm gonna be honest with you. If you drafted most leftists in this country, they would be just as ready for war as the conservatives in this country, okay? Like, Jesus. You, like, yeah, it turns out we have these things called boot camps that like train people to kill each other. All it takes is some basic training and a gun. And nowadays, guess what? Guess what? Since we live in the modern era, leftists who just play video games all day are perfectly suited to flying drones and murdering people from the sky remotely. So, I don't know. What? Wazir Like what? What do you think boot camps are for? Boot camps are for training people to kill each other. What are you talking about? Yeah, also, I hate to tell you this, but like, many members of my mod team are veterans who are leftists. And I'm willing to bet that all told, my team of... I've said this jokingly before, but if my mod team really put their minds to it, we could probably make a state secede from the United States, okay? Successfully. Oh, I have friends in the army? Okay, well, guess what? I have friends that invented the internet for the American government, okay? Do you have friends that have done that? Do you have friends who have literally been CIA? Do you have friends who've literally worked on nuclear reactors for the military? Do you have friends that have literally done all those things? Because we literally have them in the chat right now. But sure, yeah, leftists not good at fighting, not good at military stuff. Yeah, those friends in the army. I'm not gonna go there. I'm not gonna go there. Yeah, I'm sorry. Did you think people in World War II that were drafted into World War II were cut from a cloth, ready for war? Most kids who were drafted into World War II were like fucking bumpkins. Like, what are you talking about? There are literally members of the military in chat right now who have had top secret level clearance. Like, what are you talking about? People are crying over words nowadays. Words. And wait, Wazir D, do you think that in the past people didn't say things that made other people upset? Because I'm pretty sure at every single point in the past, if you said the wrong thing to the wrong person, they would fucking kill you. Like, what are you talking? Have you ever seen how like men in like the 1920s or 1930s react to someone making fun of their mother? Yeah, we're being stun-locked. We're being stun-locked real hard right now. You know that like the America like had a prolonged like decade or so where you could be thrown in prison for words. Did you know that? Did you know that that you could be blacklisted from your entire organization if you said the wrong words? Is chat being stupid? Yes. Jesus. Did you know at one point in history, if you said the wrong thing about the king, you could literally be executed on the spot? Just like the idea that like people didn't used to get upset over words is like the stupidest fucking thing. Wow, people today are so fragile. They're so upset over words, says man in the most permissive time of being able to say things in history. Jesus. If anything, we are currently living in the most permissive word time in history because no one is going to be able to murder you for saying things. Because it sounds to me, Wazir, and correct me if I'm wrong. It seems like you're upset that other people get upset when you say things that are like really, really dumb fuck, and that's like you're projecting that onto an entire generation rather than examining your own behavior. I might be going out on a limb on that one, but it seems more like a you problem and less like a generation problem. Anyway.
Is standard work attire. You don't have to wear stuffy, uncomfortable clothes anymore. Let me tell you, my favorite clothes, Cuts clothing.
Oh my God. Another ad. Jesus.
Work clothes out right now. Okay, so what exactly is missing for young people? I think in a nutshell, what is missing for young people is a sense of mission. What are they supposed to do? What are they?
Oh, even in Spain, you can get arrested for criticizing the monarch? Wow. Yeah. Poor Spain. I'm sure it's the current generation's fault that you can't criticize the monarch in Spain.
They aiming at?
Why is the new Spanish generation so butt mad over words?
Their life aimed at, and it can't be that your life is just aimed at quote unquote achievement, because achievement is instrumental. Achievement toward what? What exactly is the achievement meant to fulfill? If it's just about making money, that ain't gonna do it. Because you can make a lot of money and you can be very successful, but if you actually have not fulfilled your role in life, that doesn't mean you're not gonna be miserable. As I've said before.
Okay, but what determines your role in life, Ben Shapiro? It seems to me like you're saying that every human being has a specific role and function in life. And that seems like horse shit. Your role in life is what you make it, okay? You can find fulfillment in a lot of different ways, chat. You can find fulfillment in helping your community, in bringing people together, in personal, spiritual pursuits. But you know what? You know what makes all of that a lot easier to do? Having money. Having money makes it a lot easier to find personal fulfillment. Having money makes it easier to bring a community together. You know what's really hard to do? Bring a community together and help other people when you have to spend every waking moment of every day struggling to survive. That it helps. That's what helps. Ben Shapiro's just making an argument that you don't need money. You just need to fulfill your role in life. And it's like, well, yeah, having money helps to do that.
Again, people who are middle to upper income tend to have higher suicidal ideation as teenagers than many people who are impoverished. So the question becomes, what exactly are you aiming at? What is the achievement geared toward? Well, when you remove the idea, particularly from successful young men and women, that there is any purpose to their lives, when you tell them that the purpose of your life is authenticity, you're always going to fall short. So we have sold our kids a bill of goods. The bill of goods that we have sold our kids is that they are completely autonomous spirits resting in biologically constraining bodies. We have told them that authenticity is the only thing that...
God, good thing Ben Shapiro doesn't live during some kind of cyberpunk future. You know, like Ben Shapiro would not be able to wrap his little rat brain around like the idea of like mechanical limbs being swappable. You might say, oh no, Ben Shapiro would be able to handle that. Okay. Imagine Ben Shapiro trying to wrap his head around like people who do that with their genitals. Okay. Imagine Ben Shapiro trying to like grapple with the idea that cyborgs exist that just have like interchangeable genitals.
Matters. And this is a radical shift in how we bring up our children. Because instead of suggesting to them that there are expectations that you must fulfill, that there are roles that if you successfully fill them will make you happy in life, we have told them that the only thing that you should be concerned about is pleasing yourself. The only thing you should be concerned about is finding your true self and then having the rest of the world adapt to you. And guess what? That's not reality. You're setting up your own kids for failure. And when you set up a fake reality in which...
Hey, Ben, you know what else is not helpful? You know what else is not helpful? And we know this from historical precedent. It's not helpful to tell kids that their role in life is to grow up, have babies, and have a good job. That isn't helpful either, okay? Because a lot of people don't want babies. A lot of people don't want that. A lot of people aren't straight, Ben Shapiro. And a lot of the people who aren't straight, if they do want babies, are prevented from having babies by people like you. Jesus. Do I get big anime boobies too? True.
Which everybody online is bragging about how they've achieved a level of happiness through a method that really makes it impossible to achieve happiness. And when people inevitably fall short, they aren't happy. So the reason I'm connecting this to government is because I think that one of the reasons that Americans have such...
Yeah, exactly, a Peppy Toaster. Like, a lot of trans people, try so fucking hard to live up to the role that they were given in life, you know? A lot of trans people try for almost their entire lives to live up to that role. And you know what? There are trans people alive today who waited until their entire extended family died for them to come out as trans. There are people in nursing homes who waited their entire lives and pretended to fill that role their entire lives, and they were miserable 80% of the time. They were fucking miserable that they couldn't be themselves. It is not helpful to force yourself into a role that is not acceptable for you. Different people have different goals. Different people are suited for different things, and we should let people find their own role in life. Ben Shapiro doesn't want you to find your role in life. Ben Shapiro wants you to fulfill a basic function, which is having more white babies. That's it. That's it. That's it.
Cynical view of the future of the country is because they have been told for more than a century at this point that American government can solve all of their problems. As I have said over and over and over, American government cannot solve 90% of your problems. American government can solve the problem of whether your neighbor is going to try to kill you. American government might be able to...
Ben, how is the American government going to solve that problem? I'm pretty sure that's illegal right now, and a lot of neighbors try and kill each other anyway. Wait, what? Wait.
Problem of whether your neighbor is going to try to kill you. American government...
Yeah, your neighbor can still try and kill you, Ben. That happens all the time. We watch crime videos.
Might be able to solve the problem of how to mobilize in the face of foreign invasion. American government cannot solve your problem of happiness. All the American government can...
True. But you know what the American government can do? The American government can ensure that every man, woman, and child in the United States isn't homeless and never experiences like food scarcity. You know, the American government can do both those things. The American government, because it represents the will of the people, allegedly, can be changed to provide basic goods and services for everybody. And by providing those basic subsistence standards, say that 5 times fast, it makes it a lot easier for people to be happy. It's a lot easier for people to find and pursue happiness. Because again, the Constitution of the United States was predicated on 3 things: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It doesn't promise you happiness. But you know what makes it a whole lot easier to pursue happiness? Having a basic assurance of a standard of life and having your liberty assured. You need life and liberty to pursue happiness, and the government can provide the material conditions necessary for life to subsist and for liberty to be assured.
Can do is protect you from the predations of your neighbors. That's all government really was designed to do.
But Ben Shapiro doesn't want the government to do those things. That's too socialist for him. Ben Shapiro doesn't want you to have the ability to pursue happiness. He only wants that for the wealthy among us. So, I don't know. Keep that in mind when you watch Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro isn't advocating for you if you're working class. He's barely even advocating for you if you're middle class. His primary motives are advocating for the top 1%, aka the people who fund his show and his website.
But if you've been promised that the government can solve all your problems and then the government falls short, you're going to be disappointed with whoever is the head of the government, no matter who it is. And the same thing holds true.
Yeah, it's almost like we have some kind of representative government, right? Where if somebody disappoints us, we should elect somebody else. That's kind of the system we have.
Bringing up kids. If you teach your kids that the path to enlightenment and happiness is the search within, you're searching in the wrong place, Indy. They're digging in the wrong place. That is not where happiness lies. Now, traditional religious viewpoints as to how to bring up children suggest that there are certain things that are expected of kids. And what is expected of kids is that we are going to civilize you into a role in a community, in a society in which you are expected to not only better yourself as a character and cultivate virtue, but to better the community around you and to become a full-fledged part of that community. You know, whenever there is a baby born in the Jewish community, there are blessings that are given to the kid. And some of those blessings are that they should reach bar mitzvah and they should become, when you are bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, then you become an adult. And now that comes with obligation. It's not about the party. It comes with actual obligations, right? The idea in most traditional religions is that as you age, more responsibility is put on you. And that responsibility gives you a sense of fulfillment and meaning and purpose. And then the idea is that you're going to get married, right? It's
Wazir D, I saw your question about why are immigrants coming to the United States. Largely, it's because the United States has historically destabilized South America and Latin America, and so those countries are in a far worse state than the United States is. Turns out when the CIA assassinates your head of government or funds literal death squads with cocaine money, turns out that creates destabilizing forces in your country that make it really dangerous and life-threatening to be there. And so you leave to try and find a place that is more stable. Also, it turns out there are more Mexican immigrants leaving the United States for Mexico than there are coming in. So most immigrants who come here and have a better alternative do leave.
L'chuppah v'l'ma'asim tovim. You're gonna get married. You're gonna have kids, and you're gonna commit good deeds. Right? This is your role in life, and you are designed to fill these particular roles. I've talked about this a little bit for the past couple of weeks, because I think that as a society we have decided that roles themselves are bad. Right? If authenticity is about throwing off the shackles of society,
yeah, the U.S. government literally allowed fruit companies to wage wars in Latin America that overthrew governments and turned them into corporatocracies, okay? Like, yeah, there are probably a lot of people in those countries who want to leave and go someplace else. And if the state that overthrew them is the United States, they probably want to go to the United States because it's not going to be overthrown by, like, the CIA.
things of you. And if the only thing that can make you happy is fulfillment of traditional roles, and I'm not talking traditional roles like women subservient to men or something. I'm talking about traditional roles like wife or mother for a woman, or father and protector for a man.
Ben, we're gonna back up real quick on that one. We're gonna back up on that one real quick. We're gonna break this down.
Demands things of you. And if the only thing that can make you happy is fulfillment of traditional roles, and I'm not talking traditional roles like...
By the way, the premise of this is incorrect on, like, just from the beginning. The only thing in life that can make you happy is up to you. You get to decide what makes you happy. You get to pursue what makes you happy. Being a wife or a mother or a father, that makes some people happy. It doesn't make everybody happy. And trying to wedge yourself into a role that was not made for you, that is unsuitable for you, that actually doesn't make you happy is a terrible idea and a sure path towards making yourself miserable. Now let's break this down a little bit more.
Women subservient to men or something. I'm talking about traditional roles, like wife or mother for a woman.
So, Ben, when you're talking about traditional roles, the traditional understanding of a wife and a mother literally is someone who is subservient to men. That is the traditional understanding of what wifeliness and motherhood are. My parents, when they got married, so this is within my parents' lifetime, when they got married, they had a big fight over their marriage vows because within living memory, marriage vows included a wife's swearing to honoring and obeying her husband. That was a very traditional part of the marriage vow. It was a literal calling for subservience. Like, you can't divorce these two concepts. Like, nothing has happened over the past 50 years to solidify that it is... nothing has happened over the last 50 years that has made... God, what am I even trying to say? I'm sputtering. Sorry, that notification threw me off my game. People still associate this. When people say that they are in favor of traditional institutions, typically when they're talking about traditional marriage, they are talking about the subservience of women. That is typically what they're talking about. You can't differentiate these things and then rail against feminism, because feminism literally gave people, specifically a lot of women, the tools to say, no, we are no longer subservient to men. And I think that's a good thing.
Or father and protector for a man. If you throw away those traditional roles, there is nothing that can supplant that. The search for authenticity is going to be ongoing because there's no point at which you, quote unquote, reach authenticity. It turns out that when you reach authenticity, people may disapprove of your behavior. Or your authentic choices may redound not to your benefit, but to your detriment. You might be making choices that are inherently damaging to you. It turns out that sometimes you're not the best judge of your own interest. In fact, a huge percentage of the time, you're not the best judge of what it is that is going to make you happy in the...
I love how Ben Shapiro is just blatantly calling his audience a bunch of morons who can't decide what will actually make them happy. And so Ben Shapiro points out that his audience is a bunch of morons who mostly don't know what makes them happy, right? And then just goes on to tell them, you will be happy if you become a father. You will be happy if you become a mother. Accept traditional gender roles. Accept them. As if traditional gender roles have been the same for all of human history. We know that's not true. There are people in civilizations all around the world at different points in time who've had very different gender roles, very different understandings of gender. Again, we've had civilizations that had 3, 4, 5 different genders. And so the idea that Ben Shapiro has that you need to embrace a given gender role in order to be happy, to embrace the current gendered paradigm in order to be happy, is just inaccurate. That isn't how this works. You can find happiness through many different avenues, and often it's not through accepting your gender role. Often it is through community. Community is often what gives us our affirmations. Community is often what allows us to feel a sense of building and fellowship. Community is the thing that often brings us happiness. And in order to have that community, you can get that from a bunch of different places. But yeah, in Ben Shapiro's world, if you're gay, if you're trans, he doesn't want you to have that sense of community. He's actively advocating against what would make you happy. Ben Shapiro's diagnosis for a trans man would be to go and get married to another man and swear to honor, cherish, and obey him. That's Ben Shapiro advocating for what a trans man should do. He would say to a trans woman, you need to go and get married to a woman and impregnate her. And that is the only way you are going to be happy in life. And that's fucking insane to me. That is insane to me. Yeah, no, Archangel, that does sound a bit hyperbolic, but honestly, it's not that far off. Ben Shapiro's solution to trans people would be essentially a form of corrective rape. And to gay people too. You know, if you're gay, well, the only thing that will make you happy in life is if you marry a woman and become a father. That's the only way you'll be happy. Conservatives are some of the most miserable people on the planet, my dude.
The absence of any sort of societal guidance. This is particularly true of children, who are completely incapable of making good decisions. And yet we have told kids from the time they are very, very young, quote unquote, you can be whatever you want to be. Now, if what you mean by that is if you try really hard in any particular field, then you can have the possibility of success, that's true. But if you mean that you can be...
God, Ben Shapiro would be... I know Ben Shapiro has kids, but, like, I can't imagine how miserable it would be to be raised by this man. Like, he sits down with his kid. He's like, now listen, child. Or, sorry, now, hypothetically, child. Say you are told that you can be anything you want to be, okay? Say that you are told that. Now, I want you to understand that that doesn't mean you can actually be what you want to be, all right? You can't be anything, all right? You are a small human, and that is all you will ever be, okay? So you need to, hypothetically, I'm saying this, all hypothetically, all right? You need to do what I tell you to do, because you are a stupid, little thing, okay? And if you do not do what I tell you to do, you will not get dessert, and you will be locked in your room, and I will not let you do things, okay? I don't know. It was just like, sorry, that's horrible parenting. Horrible parenting. You gotta, look, Ben, if you want to be a good parent, you gotta love and support your kid no matter what. No matter what. You gotta love and support your kid. Saying like, oh, no, little Timmy, you can't be everything you want to be, all right? You really can't be an astronaut because you have you have to wear glasses. That's too bad for you. You'll never be an astronaut. Sorry, you'll never be good at writing books, Charles, because you have ADHD. You just don't have the attention span for it, baby. Like, I don't know. I know I personally would. My heart breaks for his children. God, I'm not playing this.
A girl if you're a boy, or you can act in any particular field, then you can have the possibility of success. That's true. But if you mean that you can be a girl if you're a boy, or you can act in any way that you want and have it all, Hey Ben, if you ever have trans kids, I want you to film. Ben Shapiro, here's my challenge to you, okay? One YouTuber to another, all right? Ben Shapiro, here's my challenge. I want you to film yourself telling your child that if they are trans, that is a stupid and silly thing for them to be. I want you to film that, okay? I want you to film that for posterity. Because if you happen to raise a kid
who's trans. You know, you raise that 1 in 100 kid, that 1 in 200 kid who happens to be trans. I want you to have that film for yourself to remind yourself every single day why your child fucking hates you. Because if you raise a child like that, Ben, you're essentially telling them that if they find out that they're trans later in life, you will not support them. You will fucking hate them. Ben Shapiro, believing in America, American exceptionalism, believing in American freedom, not believing in modern medical science, not believing in medical practices that have been around for over a century, and just deciding that people shouldn't be allowed to be trans because that's not traditional. At the same time, though, I don't think that positive reinforcement always is helpful. Disabled person, I wish my parents and authority figures would have been more upfront with me about how I was going to be treated and the limitations I'd have in life. Not being prepared for that because you were sheltered from that really sucks. Well, true. Absolutely, one-hand wonder. But I don't think being realistic means not supporting your kid. I think being realistic means supporting your kid to get them all the tools that they might need to succeed in life, regardless of what might happen to them, right? Regardless of how their disability might progress, regardless of the mental health that they problems they might encounter later, regardless of the physical disabilities they might suffer from like a car accident or a random happenstance, regardless of whether they find out they're gay or bi or pansexual, happy Pansexual Awareness Day, or if they find out that they're trans. You can still know that in today's society, trans people suffer a lot of discrimination, and you can talk with your kid about that, and you can prepare your kid for that while still loving and supporting them. In fact, I would say that preparing them to face the discrimination in the outside world is part of what loving your kid means. And I just cannot fathom being a parent to a life that you decided to bring into this world, a life that you decided to bring in regardless of whether it turned out to be disabled or difficult or criminal or gay. You knew that by having a baby, your kid could be any of those things or all of those things. And you chose to have a kid, Ben. And you aren't prepared to support that kid if it turns out to be trans. Just like that is so goddamn pathetic. As a human being and as a father, Ben Shapiro is a fucking failure. And he proves that every single time he opens his mouth.
That is true. And then when we reinforce that perception with a social media milieu that has people taking selfies and bragging about their own levels of happiness and having achieved this chimera of a vision, people are going to be unhappy. You've also destroyed the sense of roles that are necessary in order to promulgate community. Communities require roles. If you interact with other people, you are playing a role. They are playing a role. There's nothing.
Hey Ben, do you know that this point that you're bringing up unravels every other point that you've been making? Like, Ben Shapiro has been talking about, well, you need to fulfill some kind of role. You need to fulfill traditional roles. And it's just like, then he goes on, I mean, anyone who participates in a community fulfills a role. And it's just like, yeah, Ben, yeah. if you are participating in any community, you are fulfilling a role, Ben. That's why you can find community. You can find a role in any community. It doesn't have to be a traditional role. It doesn't have to be married to traditional gendered expectations. You can just be part of a community and not be like a weird little freak. That you can just do that. You can find community in like trans circles, in queer circles, in like sports teams. You can find community at your local community center. You can join intramural sports and have like community that way. You can do all kinds of different things to put yourself within a community and to find roles within that community. It doesn't have to be what you've been advocating for this entire time, which is traditional roles.
Nothing wrong with roles. In just a second, we're going to get to the issue of roles and why the left fights so strongly against them and why it's completely emptying out young people. It really, really is. It's leaving them aimless.
The left doesn't fight against gender role. The left doesn't fight against roles, Ben. The left fights against the prescriptive notion that you have to be a certain way to fulfill a certain role. You can be a community leader, you can be a community organizer, you can be a community member or contributor without needing to be a certain way.
It's leaving them spirits without flesh. And that is not something that can be rectified quickly or easily. First, let's talk about a great gift you can get for somebody this holiday. Feel it touches. Classic for a parent. Don't wait while you're there. Stand behind 1,005 and 365 days. Happy one. Shapiro forward that you are meant to play over the course of your life. So we are embodied being. This is the place to start. When we talk about human nature, we have to understand that we're not free-floating spirits in the machine. We can't just make up our own reality. And biology is not an obstacle. Biology is part of who you are. Right? You are not just a spirit, and you are not just biology. You are both, and they are combined.
This is a weird, like, take? I don't know how to respond to this.
And what that means is that your biology is not your enemy. Sometimes it's something you have to curb, but it is not, in fact, opposed to you. It's not an obstacle. You don't get to be, quote unquote, whatever you want to be, regardless of your biology.
Hey, Ben, have you ever heard of a thing called medicine? Have you ever heard of a thing called medicine or, like, surgery, Ben? Like, Ben Shapiro, I would hazard a guess that you would say, like, if somebody pops their, dislocates their knee, I would hazard a guess to say that, like, you think it's okay for them to get surgical correction for that and, like, treatment to allow them to, like, walk better and, like, be able to move around and not be in pain. I would guess that you would be in favor of that. That is, to some degree, changing how your biology works. As a biological organism, it is changing the function and makeup of your body, Ben. We have all kinds of ways to change our biology. And to that extent, biology is to some extent malleable. Right? We have ways that we can literally transplant organs from one person into another person. That seems like it would be fundamentally a huge change to someone's biology. And Ben, we also have medications that produce changes in biology in people. We have medications that cause your brain to release serotonin so that you don't want to kill yourself. We have technologies that change the biological functions of different parts of your body. Like the adrenal gland or I'm forgetting the puberty gland, right? We have medications that change how your biology functions in order to get more optimal outcomes. Yeah, thyroids. Thank you, Draco Wrath. Sorry. We have the ability to do these things. So to some extent, the field of medicine has always been about making our biology more malleable and bettering our quality of life as a result. And that is also true for trans people, Ben. Transgender people take mostly, not all trans people do, but most trans people take medication that changes how their body functions. It changes your fundamental biology. Right? Like when a trans man starts taking testosterone, that trans man is fundamentally changing their biological makeup. You can't tell me with a straight face, after looking at a before picture and an after picture of a man who's transitioned, you cannot tell me that their biology hasn't fundamentally changed. They look completely different. Like both on the outside, and you can tell they're different on the inside. Because their muscles grow, their voice drops, there are a lot of biological changes that happen when a trans man takes testosterone. The same is true of trans women. Trans women literally grow breasts. Trans women literally start having hormonal cycles. Trans women like change in size. Some trans women lose like several inches off their height. Some trans women have their feet shrink. You cannot look at the fundamental changes in like muscle density and bone strength and size and tell me that there aren't biological changes happening. And those breasts that trans women grow, a lot of them can also lactate. There are numerous different examples of what I'm talking about. So when Ben is talking about biology being like, you know, that's just part of who you are, you can't change it, that is just fundamentally not true. And it's something that we have known is not true for literally as long as medicine has existed. Yeah, and true, a peppy toaster. Some cis men can lactate even without drugs. Does that mean you could get a little shorter on HRT? Yeah, absolutely, Box Fun. I've lost like about an inch in height. I used to be 5'7", and now I'm solidly 5'6". Yeah, there's some men can lactate. There are studies on this. I thought you were. Why do you keep saying you thought I was 5'3"? No, I'm 5'6". So like, you're so. I am small. So it's just Ben Shapiro fundamentally doesn't understand what he's talking about because he's not talking, as he likes to claim, about facts. Instead, what Ben Shapiro is talking about are just, he's mostly just speaking to, as he said, tradition. Ben Shapiro makes appeals to tradition and the traditional understanding of societal roles, the tradition of American social functions, I guess. And he views any deviation from that as something fundamentally wrong, bad, and harmful to everyone. And that position is just old man yelling at cloud. It is just a gut feeling. It is just a reaction against change that has happened and will continue to happen. There is nothing that Ben Shapiro can do to make medical advances stop. There's nothing that Ben Shapiro or his viewers can do to keep society the same forever, because society, and much like biology, doesn't stagnate forever, okay? We are in a constant state of flux, and the only way that we can move forward to a brighter, happier future is by embracing that change and pursuing change in the healthiest way possible. Oh yeah, the big trans funded this stream, by the way. So the big trans lobby, the super wealthy pro trans capitalists funded this stream.
Right? I'm 5'9". I'm an Orthodox Jew. I ain't playing in the NBA. I can't be whatever I want to be.
Wait, he's 5'9". Okay, well, I looked up his height earlier. It said 6'2". Okay, so he's 5'9" now. Now I'm confused. I feel like he's covering for actually being shorter.
I can be what I'm capable of being. Okay, but we have decided that that's not true. We have decided, because we are so fixated on this idea that all autonomy is sort of in your head, that children ought to be granted autonomy they are not capable of having. Like, children ought to be making decisions about, for example, their own gender when they're...
Hey, by the way, the shortest NBA player is 5'3". So... if you're using height as an excuse for not being in the NBA, sorry, Ben Shapiro, you just gave up because you assumed your biology was too limiting. You just gave up because you assumed your biology was too limiting. There are people who are like half a foot shorter than you, Ben, who are in the NBA. Damn. There's even a picture. You guys want to see? You guys want to see the picture? Here is one of the shortest NBA players in history, next to one of the tallest. All right? Get ready, guys. You can be 5'3" in the NBA. Don't ever let anyone tell you what you can and can't do. You're the one who's going to decide your own limits.
It's totally insane. I mean, my son is not even capable of deciding what to eat in the evenings. He's not capable of deciding whether he should go to school. If he had his way, he would never go to school. Okay, but we have told kids that they are to be treated like little adults, which they are not. Instead, there are roles that we play over the course of our life. Some of those roles have to do with aging. When you are young, you're a learner. That means you need people who are shaping and guiding you. People who are giving you a sense of mission. As a citizen in your community, you have to believe in the collective purpose of that community. If you're an American, you have a role
Good night,
as an American.
Ashmar.
And that role is to uphold the founding principles of the Declaration of Independence and Constitution of the United States. That is your role. That role exists in every nationality in world history. It is only in the modern era that we have created nationless people who believe that they are citizens of the world. There's no such thing as a citizen of the world. Honestly, try paying taxes to the world. You're a citizen of whatever country you reside in. And so either you should...
Really, Ben? Ben Shapiro making an argument for all immigrants becoming citizens. Ben Shapiro, I'm surprised about this base take coming from you. Quite strange, quite peculiar, I must say.
Become a full-fledged citizen and act like a citizen, or you should move. Okay, what that means is a certain level of loyalty to the core philosophy of the nation to which you belong.
Ben Shapiro, I always thought that you were the cool kids philosopher. I expected better ideas from you than just a dressed-up, love it or leave it meme.
You have a role as a parent. That role is not to abdicate the responsibility for bringing up your kids. It's the role of cultivating yourself virtuously so you can bring up your kids properly and inculcate in them certain values. You have a role as a husband.
Yeah, you gotta inculcate. Are you even raising kids if you aren't inculcating them? Do you even inculcate, bro? Jesus. And Ben, I'm gonna go off on a limb, okay? I'm gonna go off on a limb. When you say inculcate, that typically involves like unbiased instruction. I'm gonna say you aren't teaching from an unbiased perspective, Ben Shapiro, editor-in-chief of The Daily Wire and host of a noted far-right talk show, I'm going to guess that what you really mean is indoctrinate. You should indoctrinate your kids. And you know what? As far as like conservatives are concerned, you probably should indoctrinate your kids. You probably should throw away like a lack of bias. You probably should throw away all of the values that might preclude that might have you teaching in an unbiased way. Okay, because the facts are not on your side. If you were to teach trans issues in an unbiased way, that would just be teaching trans rights. That would just be teaching medical science as it relates to trans people. Is it possible to teach void of bias? No. That is true. It is not possible to teach void of bias. However, it is possible to create curriculums that attempt to be unbiased. That is possible. But Ben Shapiro doesn't have an interest in being unbiased. That's not his interest. Yeah, so to sum up, tradition is happiness. Deviation plus social media equals unhappiness. Aspiring to be your authentic self is against tradition, so that means it's unhappiness. Yeah, Ben is basically saying, know your role and shut the fuck up. And also saying that, like, you need to indoctrinate your kids. And I'm going to be honest, guys, the only way conservatism in its current form can survive is if conservative parents indoctrinate their kids. There is no way an even somewhat even-handed teaching of modern issues that conservatives take umbrage with would lead to their kids being conservative, at least not in the current sense. So that's... Look, if you want your political movement to succeed, you got to make sure your kids never see any leftist media and only watch Pure Flix films, all right? Yeah, my conservative parents tried and failed. Yeah. Conservatives aren't very good at this stuff.
Husband or as a wife, right? And that role as a husband or a wife is to cultivate yourself, become a better, more caring human being. And yes, to be the other half of the person of the opposite sex to whom you're going to commit your life and then produce children within that marriage. Right? These are historically approved roles. And when people look at the...
I do have to wonder, would Ben Shapiro be in favor of me marrying a woman? Would Ben Shapiro be in favor of that, I wonder? Like, does Ben Shapiro want trans women to marry other women? Like... I genuinely want to know that, you know? Because that'd be kind of funny. It'd be kind of funny if Ben Shapiro, like, weirdly started advocating for gay marriage, but only for trans people. I mean, yeah, no, things were okay once. Yeah, I mean, that is the real answer. Ben Shapiro just wants trans people to stop existing. Ben Shapiro, unironically, would probably be in favor of, like, Hitler's death camps, but for trans people only. Like, unironically, probably. I would say he's probably in favor of that, yeah. Gay marriage for everyone, straight marriage is outlawed. True.
Of the past, and they scoff at it. And so why can't we just remake the world today? The answer is you're being an idiot. Because wisdom of the past is there for a reason. It has been tried. It is true. Now, that doesn't mean there can't be incremental changes. It doesn't mean that certain conflicts of the past don't crop up and force us to rectify them. This is not a Hegelian notion that everything that was meant to be. But it is true that if something has lasted the test of time, thousands and thousands of years, there probably is something to it beyond what your pea brain thinks there is. The way that most...
Let me clarify. I don't think that Ben Shapiro I don't think Ben Shapiro would be openly advocating for death camps, but Ben Shapiro would definitely be in favor of like basically every single step leading up to the creation of a death camp. I think for like queer people and trans people, absolutely, and also for immigrants, absolutely.
Most people are inculcated in a culture is not even that you are sat down and taught that marriage is an inherent good. It's that you watch your parents being married and you realize that it's an inherent good. It's not that you look around and you think, okay, well, freedom is a good thing and I've rationalized it out of my brain. As Michael Oakeshott, the philosopher, has suggested, most politics is not rationalism. Most politics is inculcated in the water and in the air we breathe. I was once sitting with Sam Harris, who of course is a famous atheist, and we were talking about values. And I was pointing out that he gets his values from the same place that I do, namely a Judeo-Christian culture in which he was raised. Because he was saying, well, I came up with these values, myself, and I've thought them through, and I'm sure he has thought them through. But the reality is that Sam Harris and I share 80% of values, 90% of values. That's because we grew up like 10 miles from each other in California, in a society that was built on several thousand years of common history.
Hey, Ben, do you know that like just because ideas are old doesn't make them good? Do you understand that old ideas aren't necessarily better ideas? Do you know what? Again, Aristotle thought that women were conceived in cold and wet environments, and that men were the result of hot, dry environments during sex. Which, it's surprising that if that was the case, it's surprising you didn't have two boys. All right.
That being a part of that stream, being a person who fulfills roles inside, that is a fulfilling thing. It is a good thing. It's a thing you're supposed to be teaching your kids because you cultivate virtue within each of these roles, right? Each of these roles requires you to follow certain rules and also to exercise certain liberties. In order to be a good parent, you have to stick and move. In order to be a child who's properly learning, you have to have the freedom to learn. In order to be somebody who acts as a good American citizen, you have to exercise your freedom to produce, right? You have to exercise your freedom to be creative. Now, all of these things are inherent goods, but they don't exist in the absence of roles for which they are designed. They are instrumental goods, in other words. Most of the things we think of in life as inherent goods are not inherent goods, they're instrumental goods. They're directed toward a higher good, toward a larger purpose. And when we sort of make the morally relativistic point that no, these are inherent goods, freedom is inherent good, not freedom directed toward a higher purpose, freedom just itself, well, then you've created no limits for people. And that's not fulfilling. The reason that people ask people, if you ever want to see truly what people's lives are about, go read obituaries. Go read obituaries. Because I'll tell you what obituaries never say. This person identified as a person of gender X. This person interacted with their colleagues on Twitter. These are things that don't make the obits.
I'm pretty sure that most obits of trans people who've been out and like doing activism probably mention that they were trans. Most of them do, actually. You just don't. Okay. Let me just call bullshit on this. Ben Shapiro doesn't go and read the obituaries, okay? Ben Shapiro absolutely does not do that, okay? He has better things to do with his time than to open up the daily paper and, like, read obituaries of random people he has no investment in. He absolutely does not do that.
And if you really want the boiled down version, go check out gravestones at the cemetery. Right, the gravestones at the cemetery usually say things like beloved father and husband, right, beloved mother. Right, these are the things that people want to be remembered as. It's role fulfillment. Okay, now,
hey Ben, you realize you've never seen the bodies under those tombstones, Ben. How do you know what their biology was? What if a trans man was buried under a tombstone that said loving father, Ben? What if a trans woman was buried under a tombstone that said loving wife, devoted mother? Ben, you can't tell what their genitals are, Ben. Oh my God. How do you tell? Because some people do want those roles. Even trans people. God, he is such a dork. Yeah, I'm sure Ben Shapiro also takes many daily trips to the cemetery to just read random gravestones.
decided that these roles are not only no longer necessary, they're repressive and bad, and they ought to be fought. And we are teaching our kids.
Ben, if you think that you haven't been in trans circles enough, I guarantee you there are a lot of trad wife trans girls. Okay, I guarantee you. Okay, there are trad wife trans girls on Twitter right now ooh-wooing at each other and ooh-wooing at men that they find attractive. All right, like yo, for real. Exactly. Look, we got a bunch of ooh-woos in chat right now.
This, and then we are shocked.
No, Blair White isn't trad wife trans. Blair White literally thinks that it's gay for men to fuck her. So, no, she's not a trad wife by her own definition.
That our kids are depressed. We are shocked that our kids are looking for authenticity in all the wrong ways. We are shocked that when they go searching for what is me and they come up short, they start dosing themselves into oblivion. When we remove them from a communal context in which you are naturally forced to play a role, right? If you've ever been in high school, you know this, right? You play a role in high school, but you play roles throughout your lives. And here's the thing. Even when we pretend that there are not roles to play, you end up playing a role. Okay, but the role you play might be a toxic role. The role you play might be as the court jester. The role you play might be as the example.
Oh, yeah, no. Blair White has literally said in one of her videos that she thinks that men who fuck her are gay.
To others of how not to live your life. There are a lot of roles out there.
Yeah, she said it's not the straightest thing ever.
And the ones that matter typically are the ones that have to do with historically tried and true roles that have provided fulfillment to people across cultures for all of human history. But here in the United States, in our pursuit of this bizarro world...
Weird how many church gravestones don't have many trans folks, Ben. True.
Complete autonomy and complete libertinism is the solution to all your ills. Authenticity is what we ought to be searching for, and we will raise our kids to search for authenticity.
Hey, Ben Shapiro, is this... I feel like this is a backlash because you called yourself a libertarian in front of Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he completely ripped into you for being anti-trans. And now you're like, yeah, complete libertarianism would be bad. So you're not a libertarian, Ben. All right. Glad for the clarification.
They've lost what makes people authentically human, which is human roles. Human roles make you human. Otherwise, just an animal.
Hey, Ben. It's amazing. You've been talking for 30 minutes now, and your entire point has been human roles make us human. And you have a role by interacting with the community. So by those two basic points that you have said, it would literally be impossible. It would literally be impossible for a human being in a modern society to have no role. Which means that just by participating in society, just by interacting with other humans, you have actually taken on roles. Meaning that all of the stuff about traditionalism and traditional understandings of gender roles, traditional understandings of roles in communities, doesn't matter because everyone is already everyone is already inhabiting a role anyway. You've used so many words just to say we live in a society, Ben. Jesus.
Otherwise, you're just a really smart animal. So the reason that I bring all of this up, of course, is because we see indicators of how we've undermined the raising of our children all over our culture. There's an article in the Washington Post today, for example, entitled "A White Teacher Taught White Students About White Privilege. It Cost Him His Job." And the idea is that we should be very much pro our teachers, teaching kids about racial essentialism, teaching kids about the evils of their country, teaching them essentially to be bad Americans. That it is good for teachers to teach kids to, by the way, if you're teaching your kids about racial essentialism, you're teaching your kid to be a bad American. You're teaching them to fundamentally reject basic notions of Western civilization, about the inherent rights of human beings, and about the fact that human beings ought not be boiled down to a...
Hey, Ben, do you know that when you're talking about basic notions of Western civilization, you're not talking about inherent human rights, because the basic notions of the vast majority of Western civilization as a whole have been like peasants rolling around in bullshit and like throwing dung heaps together. That was the vast majority of Western civilization for like the last couple thousand years. If you're talking about Western civilization in like the European to North American sense, like, or let's be real, he only means it in the European sense. Like, you know, if you're talking about the last 1,000 years of our legacy, it's literally only been in like, I don't know, since like the invention of oh god, I'm having a mind blank. Not the Renaissance, the Enlightenment. It's only been since the Enlightenment that like what ideas about like inherent human rights have even been around. Okay, up until that point, the conception of like the of human rights didn't exist. Like you could, if you were a feudal lord, you could literally do anything to the people on your property. You could rape them, you could murder them. Literally the only thing as a feudal lord that you could do that would get you fired from your job would be to be so bad at managing your peasants that they managed to overthrow you. And that only happened like 3 times. I don't know. This idea that like that like Western civilization invented human rights is pretty laughable. I mean, granted, the Enlightenment did play a pretty large role in like the shaping of civilization after that, but like you have to ignore the contributions of like indigenous folks across North America. Indigenous folks like invented football and like syringes and like the people in the Middle East invented fucking algebra, like and preserved most of like early like Greek philosophy because they were interested in philosophy. We need you to relax. I can't relax. It's just stupid. Ben Shapiro's points are stupid. And if you believe them, you're probably a little stupid too.
Mutable skin color characteristics. But the Washington Post says that they want kids to be freed of the role of good American citizen. To even say, by the way, that you should play the role of good American citizen is now considered intolerant. These sorts of words are considered coded dog whistles to say something like good American citizen. According to the Washington Post, Matthew Hahn checked his phone to see if the wait was finally over. It had been 5 months since he was fired for teaching about white privilege at a high school in rural Tennessee. 2 months since he had fought to regain his job at an emotional 3-day hearing, becoming a symbol of the acrimonious debate over the way racism, and history should be taught in America's schools. Now nothing. No announcements from the school district about his appeal effort, no messages from his lawyer, no text from friends and former colleagues, but sustained him through a lonely half year of jobless limbo. Could he return to teaching in his hometown? Apparently no one knew. Hahn, 43, white and balding, sighed. Marlowe, his German shepherd, started to whine. Hahn grabbed the leash because no matter what, he still had to walk the dog. Shrugging on a gray hoodie against the fall chill, he walked out his front door and down the long, sloped driveway of the house he had grown up in, Marlowe tugging at every step. A lifelong resident of Kingsport, Tennessee, Hahn was well aware his liberal views made him an outlier in his overwhelmingly white, mostly conservative community, but that had never mattered before. He had taught in the Sullivan County school system for 16 years without any trouble. He had taught the class that got him fired contemporary issues for nearly a decade without a single parent complaint. Then, at the start of last year, he made a pronouncement during a discussion about police shootings that would derail his career. White privilege, he told his nearly all-white class, is a fact. Then he assigned Ta-Nehisi Coates' essay, The First White President Spurring Parent Complaints. In April, a student mentioned white privilege during a class discussion about Derek Chauvin, and Hahn could not help himself. He navigated to YouTube and pulled up White Privilege, a scathing, profane, 4-minute poetry performance by Kyla Janae Lacey. Oh, am I making you uncomfortable? The black writer demands at one point. Try a cramped slave ship. I will probably get fired for showing this, Hahn joked before.
Wait, that's a good comparison, though. You should be aware of history. It's a lot easier to learn about history than it is to be brought to America as a slave.
Before hitting play, less than a month later, he was. And of course, it's very bad that Hahn lost his job. Because after all, we have to have teachers indoctrinating kids into the idea that America is inherently bad, all of its institutions shot through with racism.
Wait. He didn't say that America was inherently bad. Nothing, at no point in that quote did he say anything about America being inherently bad, actually. The poetry just included a line that said, you know, if you're uncomfortable with being confronted by ideas about white supremacy, try being stuck in a slave ship. And that's a valid comment from a descendant of slaves in America. That's a real institution that existed. Why does Ben Shapiro view that as indoctrination? Is simply learning about slave ships indoctrination to these people now? Just like, geez, like, come on now. Yeah, we should, exactly, Circuit Overlord. We should be able to talk about the systemic issues in our society, because if we can't even talk about them, we can't make them better.
Now again, teaching kids these sorts of ideas when they are 19, 20, is it
what sort of idea, Ben? You haven't been specific. Why is it bad to teach kids that Americans owned slaves? Why is that bad?
As one view among many in college. Even there, I think that there's a serious question as to whether we ought to be sponsoring anti-citizenship sentiments like the idea that racial essentialism is at the root of all of America's institutions.
Ben, that is the most disingenuous reading of those ideas, right? Because it's not a racial essentialist argument. It's pointing out that discrimination in the past has carried over via the systems that were established in the past to the modern day and shaped what we have in the modern day. Ben, you even, in your debate with Anna Kasparian, admitted that you believe that that happens. So you know, right at this very moment, that when you're saying all those things on screen, you know you're full of horseshit. In your debate with Anna Kasparian, you admitted that discrimination in the past can have effects on how different categories of people are treated today. And that is true. It was actually a thing that you said that was true. But then you go on your own show and you have the gall to just pretend like you never said that. Like you purposely misunderstand points that are being made up by leftists. It's really performative outrage on your part, Ben. And it's performative outrage that serves your goals and the goals of your donors. And frankly, it's quite cowardly. Quite cowardly.
But certainly when you're teaching kids, high school kids, are you raising kids to have a purpose as Americans when you do this sort of stuff? Serious question. And we're doing this with regard to math, too. Article today in USA Today, is math education racist? Debate rages over changes to how US teaches the subject. Instead of teaching kids to pursue success, we are now teaching kids that if they fail, it must be the system that has failed, because true authenticity is to be found within, not in fulfilling standards, not in attempting to achieve as part of a broader goal of becoming a more productive person who is capable of doing better things for family, friends, community, and country. According to USA Today, there are recommendations to make math more inclusive. Schools are collapsing math tracks to put kids of all abilities in the same classes, adding data science courses that carry the same prestige as calculus, long seen as a gateway to a career in STEM fields in elite colleges. Another heated issue, the extent to which math education should include real-world problems involving...
Hey, by the way, in case this is like, wow, they think math is racist now? In case you're in that camp, this has been something that's been studied for a long time, actually. how does race affect a student's math education? It turns out that there are papers written by educators that focus on the teaching of math and how it relates to race. And it turns out it's a complicated ass issue. Cassie Benjamin Frickin, a teacher in Minneapolis, discovered her love of math in elementary school. One of the earliest memories is begging her mother to come to school so her teachers could share how she excelled in math class. While earning average scores in reading, she was consistently above average for math, which instilled her with a sense of accomplishment. That continued into middle school, where she recalls asking her math teachers to move her into a higher grade for more advanced content, but she remained in the same middle school class. Then in high school, her excitement for math slowly turned to disappointment. Benjamin Frickin, a student of the Mille-Lacs Band of Ojibwe, a tribal nation in Minnesota, was one of 2 students of color in her 11th grade pre-calculus class. When her study partner was absent for a series of days, Benjamin Frickin began to struggle with the Benjamin Frickin began to struggle with the material and barely passed the class with a D-. Her senior year in AP Calculus repeated the pattern, lacking support and feeling ignored in the class. She passed with a D. I didn't have a math teacher that I could go and get help from. And I didn't feel comfortable at all approaching my own math teacher, she said. Recognizing the undercurrent, how her feelings of isolation were related to her race, she admits, those 2 classes really made me question, do I consider myself good at math anymore? Lately, much of the discussion of race in math education has centered on the persistent underperformance of certain student groups, particularly Black, Latino, and Indigenous youth, and their separate access to honors, gifted, and advanced mathematics courses. Yet a new paper disrupts those narratives by examining an under-addressed element of the equation, namely the ways in which whiteness in math education reproduces racial advantages for white students and disadvantages historically marginalized students of color. Let's see. Dan Beatty, an associate math professor at Rutgers University Graduate School of Education, said he set out to synthesize for math educators the research literature from sociology, history, and other disciplines on whiteness, defined in the paper as the ideology that maintains white supremacy, valuing one's racial group over others. He also sought to expose how whiteness operates in classrooms and schools, leaving Black, Latino, and Indigenous students disenfranchised mathematically. According to Beatty, there are ways in which math teachers, math educators, and math researchers are perpetuating racism in schools, which is shaping the expectations, interactions, and kinds of mathematics that students experience. And the lack of attention to whiteness as the fundamental cause for it leaves it invisible and neutral. Naming white institutional spaces, as well as identifying the mechanisms that oppress and privilege students, can give those who work in the field of mathematics education specific ideas of how to better combat racist structures. So, to clarify here, it isn't exactly as Hatwearer. It isn't a problem with math. It's the problem with how we treat math, right? And the anecdote from the beginning of the article, and I'm not going to read the entire thing. I'll throw a link in chat for you guys to look at if you'd like. But it is the way that we teach math that is the problem. And it is the way that there are social structures in our society, right, that reproduce certain social advantages for one group over another, right? Like if you're the only Black kid in an all-white class, other kids might shun you. Other kids might not want to socialize with you in order to be your partner. You know, they prefer other people who are more like them, that they've spent more time with, that they've socialized more with. And in the relatively racially segregated rooms of America's classrooms and communities, that can be a barrier to education, right? It can also be like who gets the most attention from a teacher, who gets the most help after class, who gets, you know, the different additional support structures that might be afforded to someone based on social cachet, social perception, right? And so the idea is that you want to understand how this works in a social sense within a classroom so that you can better tend to the needs of your students. It's not saying math itself is racist, but rather the way that we teach and bring up the next generation of mathematics thinkers and researchers and students can have social barriers to educating certain groups of people. And I think that that is a very reasonable conclusion to draw from the different data that's out there about how segregated our society is. The solution isn't to ignore that problem. The solution is to instead better understand the problem and then find ways that we can more effectively educate not just white kids, but all kids. Right? I feel like that's not a complicated concept, right? So Ben Shapiro is just, I would say, not understanding the issue, but it's really clear when I can Google this within 5 seconds. Ben Shapiro is just purposely and deliberately misrepresenting the issue. And I think that that is a pretty important distinction. Ben Shapiro is a propagandist. Ben Shapiro doesn't actually believe what he's saying because there are very easy ways to show that he is not being forthcoming with information. What a Weasley little liar, dude. Exactly.
Inequities. Fairly or not, that debate has landed in the murky soup of critical race theory digressions. The changes have pitted mathematicians and math educators against each other and sparked criticism from affluent parents upset by the elimination of gifted tracks. They've caused upheaval in California as parents, professors, and teachers spar over proposed changes to the state's K-12 and math framework. The attempts to dumb down math education are, of course...
Wait, does Ben has a transgender relative? Wait, who? Wait, is Mara Wilson trans? Wait.
Course, about teaching people that America sucks because of inequalities of outcome, and about teaching people that they don't actually need to fulfill standards
Hey, Vapor Drago.
In order to feel better about themselves. But they're not going to feel better about themselves because here's the thing. There is justified self-esteem and there is unjustified self-esteem. And we've been teaching kids about unjustified self-esteem for generations at this point. And it turns out unjustified self-esteem runs directly into the shoals of reality, even if the entire society decides to engage in delusions. The same thing holds true when it comes to basic biology. And you want to depress kids? Here's a great message. Boys can be girls. That's a pretty great message for depressing kids.
Wait, it's not, though. It's an accurate message for kids. Gender is a very malleable social construct that we know from historical record, from the way different societies have acted at different times. Gender is absolutely incredibly malleable. And we also know that if you're talking about sex, that is also malleable because that's the entire history of medical science. So, yes, when we talk about biology and sex, yeah, sex and biology is also something that is relatively malleable, Ben. We have medications that change how your body works. We have medications and surgeries that change your physical biology. This is not new. Okay, people have been taking hormones and having surgeries to alter their bodies in a very trans way for over 100 years now, Ben. This isn't new. And the only reason, Ben, that you think trans people are new is because of the fucking Holocaust. So maybe have a little bit of, trepidation. Have a little bit of, a little bit of an idea that maybe you should treat trans people a bit better, Ben. I don't know.
And first of all, people who suffer from gender dysphoria, which is a real diagnosable mental disorder under the DSM-5, have extraordinarily high suicidal ideation rates.
Yeah, Ben, ask any medical expert why that is, Ben. Ask any medical expert why that is, and they will tell you it's because of the people around them not treating them with basic respect, i.e., the thing that you've been advocating against this entire video. You literally said, and I'm paraphrasing here, so I guess it's not literally, but you said, to paraphrase, you should not support your kid if they are trans. That is essentially pushing a fantasy upon your kids that will make them miserable. Oh, and it's not in the DSM-5 anymore? Wait, they took gender dysphoria out of the DSM-5? The DSM-5 articulates explicitly that gender nonconformity is not itself a mental disorder. The 5th edition also includes a separate gender dysphoria in children diagnosis, and for the first time allows the diagnosis to be given to individuals with disorders of sexual development, DSD. DSM-5 also includes the optional post-transition specifier to indicate when a particular individual's gender transition is complete. In this post-transition case, the diagnosis of gender dysphoria would no longer apply, but the individual may still need ongoing medical care, e.g. hormonal treatment. Nevertheless, discussions continue among advocates and medical professionals about how best to preserve access to gender transition-related healthcare, while also minimizing the degree to which such a diagnostic categories stigmatize the very people that physicians are attempting to help. So yeah, Neil, this entire video is just like a reaction to Neil deGrasse Tyson. Absolutely. Yeah, gender identity disorder was removed. Yeah, that was removed in 2012, I think. Or at least the process was begun in 2012. So, yeah, no. Ben, the reason trans people kill themselves is because, like, when they come out to their parents are like, lol, you're a boy, you can't be a girl, or lol, you're a girl, you can't be a boy, and totally reject their child, and then their child has to deal with the fallout from that, and often the fallout from that can be like being disowned from your family and kicked out of your house. So, like, yeah, generally speaking, that's going to have massive negative implications, especially if you're younger, which most trans people tend to be, because most younger trans people feel safe enough to come out, whereas most older trans people have a lot of societal roles that they fill, Ben. I.e., again, to reference a phenomenon that I noted earlier, a lot of trans people these days who are in older generations literally wait for, like, all of their relatives to die before they come out as trans, because they feel like if they come out as trans, it will disappoint everyone around them. Like, dude, it's the social expectation of these people to perform the traditional gender roles that is making them miserable. Your advocacy in this video is explicitly what is making this, like, these people want to die, because you're advocating for the rejection of them on a very fundamental level that is not backed up in any way by modern science. Yeah, family pressures are fucking real. Oh yeah, no. Ben knows all of these things, by the way. I don't think he's a dumb man. I think that he is an intelligent man who is towing the propagandistic line for his own profit. And Ben Shapiro, here's a question for you. Your rhetoric, the end point of your rhetoric, would result in more trans people committing suicide. So why are you pushing for policies that result in the deaths of trans people, Ben? I'm curious. All of the available info that we have shows that in order to reduce suicidality in trans people, you need to use a word you used earlier, inculcate the value of acceptance of diversity in your community. That's what you need to do to bring down the rate of suicidality. It's absolutely not to double down on the gender roles that have made trans people miserable.
Okay, so the broader teaching of the lie that men can become women and girls can become boys obviously is not tied to mental health concerns on a broad societal level. We're not talking about the treatment of people with gender dysphoria. We're talking about indoctrinating kids into confusing and stupid and anti-biological ideas that we are now trying to mainstream.
Hey Ben, it's weird that you made an appeal to the DSM-5 as like some kind of medical expertise on the subject, but then are talking about how treating trans kids or treating trans people in general leads to worse outcomes, when that's literally the opposite of what happens, Ben. When you provide treatment and allow kids to be on hormone blockers, when you allow people to take hormone replacement therapy, when you allow people to get the surgeries that they need, that actually reduces the suffering. That is a way to actually improve society somewhat.
In the real world, it's a disastrously comic effect. Article from the UK Daily Mail today: fury as transgender UPenn swimmer 22, who used to compete as a man, smashes 2 U.S. women's records in weekend competition and finishes one race 38 seconds ahead of her nearest rival. Leah Thomas, 22, smashed 2 U.S. swimming records at an Akron, Ohio contest. Thomas won the 1650 freestyle in a record time of 15 minutes, 59 seconds, beating her closest rival, Anna Sofia Kalandazzi, by 38 seconds. 38 seconds. She left rivals floundering in a 500 freestyle, beating them by 14 seconds. Thomas previously competed for the school men's team for 3 years before joining the women's team. NCAA rules dictate any trans female athlete can take part in women's events if they've completed a year of testosterone suppression treatment.
And by the way, as we know, because I've gone through the data on this, all the data we have shows that within 1 to 2 years, trans women lose all of the biological advantages of their initial puberty, right? So if you are transitioning and you've been transitioning for anywhere from 1 year to 2 years, you've effectively lost all of the advantages that you once had over cisgender women, right? So we know that is like pretty well established in the science. There's still a lot more research to be done, but that's pretty firmly established. And the thing is, trans women aren't dominating everywhere. And it's interesting to me that Ben Shapiro has to like scrape the bottom of the barrel to like find examples of like trans people doing kind of okay at sports, you know? So like, for example, and I Googled this within like 5 seconds, right? All right. Trans college swimmer sets conference records, making national history. Okay, so we got Leah Thomas, University of Pennsylvania performance may foreshadow her becoming the first trans Division I All-American. Let's see. A trans athlete is setting records in the pool in her first season with the University of Pennsylvania women's swimming team. She won 3 events at the Zippy Invitational at the University of Akron, setting pool, program, and meet records. She also beat 3 school records and 2 Ivy League ones. In 2 events, she met the NCAA's A qualifying standard, meaning she can compete in the national championship next March in Atlanta. In the weeks leading up to the conference, Thomas, 22, topped the NCAA season chart in the 200-yard freestyle at a home meet against Princeton and Cornell universities. According to Outsports, she is the first trans woman to compete in NCAA women's swimming since 2019. The outlet also reports that only 1 trans student athlete has ever won a Division I individual conference title, and that only 1 trans student athlete has ever won an individual national championship and achieved All-American designation. So basically, to kind of sum up the bullshit sandwich that Ben Shapiro is trying to serve you, she did very well at one swimming meet that has her prepped for a Division 1A bid for a national championship. So she did very well, which is great. That doesn't make her just automatically like some kind of super soldier. Like if we look at the performance of trans people in the Olympics, for example, remember Laurel Hubbard? We covered Laurel Hubbard pretty extensively on this Twitch channel, right? Ben Shapiro wouldn't shut up, and other conservatives wouldn't shut up about how Laurel Hubbard was like the biggest, the strongest woman to ever compete in like lifting sports at the Olympics, right? And then she went to the Olympics. She didn't even like qualify. She went to the Olympics. She didn't like qualify for like having finished like finishing her set. So there were many other women who were stronger than Laurel Hubbard. Yeah, she didn't finish any of her lifts at the Olympics. And that's not to say she's not talented, right? Yes, the NCAA has hundreds of trans athletes, but we're supposed to focus on the one where a trans person did well. And it's just like the fear mongering about this. And if you look at like the Daily Mail articles that Ben Shapiro is looking at, they use pictures from like 2 years ago, from before this swimmer transitioned. And that is the easy way, right? Of like showing, oh, look, you think this guy should be able to compete against these women, right? But that's not an accurate portrayal of who this person is now. A great example of this is what's her name? Alana McLaughlin. That's who I was thinking of. This happened a lot with her, you know. So here we go. There we go. People would show like, look at, you think this big burly man with a big beard should be able to fight against women in MMA? And then like she fought against women in MMA and like it's fine. Like there are other women who are like stronger than her. And she's also really good at MMA. But like I think a lot of people who are reactionary against trans people in sports don't realize that one of the big reasons that trans people excel in a lot of sports related to like cisgender women's averages is that not because trans women are stronger, it's because trans women on average are taller than cisgender women. That's why. It really comes down to the height difference. And while your height can change while you're on hormone therapy, like it's not going to drastically change the averages. Right? Yeah, she still can't beat Amanda Nunes. So, I don't know. Ben Shapiro is just lying to you about this swimmer to make it seem like she just blew out all the competition. Let's see. So just to be clear, this trans swimmer that Ben Shapiro was talking about only might be. She hasn't qualified, but has a possibility of being a Division I All-American athlete. Just the possibility of that drives these people insane. And like, I'm not gonna lie, I don't give a single shit about high school sports, and I also don't give a shit about like college sports. So like, the amount to which you would have to specifically care about fucking over trans people in sports to like give this a lot of thought is really, really wild to me. All right.
Okay, so either men are unbelievably good at becoming women, like amazing. In other words, women can have to be women all their lives, but men, within 5 minutes of becoming women, are better at women than at, like nearly every athletic endeavor, or they're still.
Hey Ben, why did you use one anecdote to make a really broad point without looking at the data? Because Ben, if you look at the data, it largely aligns with the time frames. Now, I would argue it is possible. Maybe you could say the guidelines should be changed. And I'm open to this idea. Maybe you could be arguing that the guidelines should be changed, that trans women can only compete against cis women in sports after 2 years on hormone replacement therapy. But even then, it's just kind of like they would still be making all the same points. They don't give a shit about the actual integrity of the data. I've been talking a lot. Okay, I'll drink.
Men. And we as a society are lying in order to preserve the sense of authenticity of particular people. But question, is that sense of authenticity fulfilling for most people, or is...
Hey, Ben, do you think the medical establishment is just full of liars? Do you think the big trans lobby has paid off all doctors to just agree with trans people because it's the nice thing to do? I'm genuinely curious, right? Like, Ben Shapiro talks like this, but like, do you think that just most doctors in the United States and in the developed world have like decided collectively to lie to trans people? It's a really weird argument to be forced to have if you're conservative.
Reality more fulfilling? Is living in accordance with reality actually a rather fulfilling thing? You know, biblically speaking, when God places man in the Garden of Eden, and the reason I'm using the Bible here is not really for the religious commentary, although obviously I believe in the religious aspect of this, but because the Bible is the most popular book in world history and has some pretty wise things to say. It has stood the test of time. The basic metaphor of God placing man in the Garden of Eden and telling him to cultivate the ground is that the ground exists. Reality exists. You don't get to remake reality in your own image because you, in fact, are not God.
Hey, Ben, if all of the world was given over for man to cultivate, would it not also include the man's body to cultivate? Could you not also cultivate your body? Ben, are you advocating that like it's wrong for humans to create GMOs, genetically modified organisms? You know, like if it increases crop yields, is that bad, Ben, because it's against a state of nature? Or could it be that if man can cultivate the world as he sees fit, could not man also cultivate his body to being something more fit for the man? Perhaps even a woman might cultivate her own body to be more fit for herself. Who knows? It seems to me like that would be consistent with the analogy you're trying to make here, but I don't think you're interested in consistency.
You are not a spirit floating above the waters. You are something else entirely. You're an embodied human being, and playing your role in life, recognizing reality in life, is fulfilling. Take away obligation, take away responsibility to fulfill those roles, and people lose purpose.
Just do what you're told. Do what you're told. Do what you're told. Obey. Obey. Obey.
They just end up in a perfect sense of malaise. We'll get to more of this in just 1 second. First, let's talk about...
Yeah, he does think the roles come from God.
You can avail Biden announced his spike that we have seen in the United States. First, last week, Joe Biden announced his winter COVID plan. It doesn't sound like a lot of winter wonderland. He's...
Oh my God. Is he finally talking about a different topic?
Extending
Jesus.
the federal mask mandate for public transport. They're also considering requiring Americans to be fully vaxxed even in order to fly, like get on a plane. So if you want to visit your family for the holidays, you might need to drive across the country or vax in order to fly. The Biden administration is working...
Hey, Ben, almost 800,000 people have died from a pandemic that we have a vaccine to. Might it be pretty reasonable to say, hey, if you want to get into a contained box with a bunch of other people to travel long distances, you should probably be vaccinated? Might that not be a pretty reasonable vaccine mandate? I would argue yes. Like, literally more people have died from COVID than died in the Civil War. Just like, dude, come on now.
You to do more. This is why we have filed a lawsuit against Joe Biden's vax mandate for private employers. The government does not get to make these decisions for you, but we need your help. If you haven't signed our petition against Joe Biden's vax mandate, I need you to head on over right now to dailywire.com/do-not-comply to add your name. We need to send an overwhelming message to this administration that the American...
Stinky.
People will not comply. We have a goal of reaching 1 million signatures, which would provide a major boost to our legal challenge. We have over 700,000 signatures so far. We need your help to cross the finish line. So please, sign the petition at dailywire.com/do-not-comply, and then share that petition with all your friends and family. Let's send a message so loud that Brandon cannot ignore us. Also, if you have not picked up a copy of Matt Walsh's book, Johnny the Walrus, you should. In fact, you are obligated to, by the diktats of wokeness. Why? Well, not only because his book sold out within the first 24 hours, but because it is now the #1 LGBTQ plus IAA YZ /:, star, ampersand.
Man, they really only have one joke, don't they?
Bestseller on Amazon. And yes, the book is sold out. Don't worry. You can reserve your copy at Amazon to get your hands on the next batch shipping out soon. Johnny the Walrus is an exhilarating tale of a young boy pretending he's a walrus, which is fun in games until Johnny's mom decides, based on internet searches and yoga classes, that Johnny probably is actually a walrus and that she has to uphold his trans walrus identity. If you know Matt's brain, you will laugh your butt off. It's a really funny book. So head on over to Amazon, reserve your copy of Matt's timely masterpiece, Johnny the Walrus.
Yeah, no, Matt Walsh wrote an entire book predicated on the attack helicopter meme. It's pretty incredible.
Walrus today. You're listening to the largest, fastest growing conservative podcast and radio show in the nation.
Oh, thank God, it's done. It's done. Oh, thank God. I thought we had 7 more minutes of this, and we don't. Oh, thank God. Oh, boy. Yeah, look, you gotta know your role, chat, and your role in life is to suffer through Ben Shapiro videos.